Martha Hovenden, sculptor, art, something. This is New York Times. Family prominent in abolitionist cause dies in Bryn Mawr. And it basically talks about her father, talks about the Underground Railroad, and talks about these pieces. That's about it. Martha Maulsby Hovenden, the daughter of Thomas Hovenden and Helen Corson-Hovenden. They were both famous painters. Martha became a sculptor. This was her studio, and this is where she lived all her life. When your work has been virtually forgotten for the last 100 years. So from that point of view, it's very interesting. And it's to some degree like I'm resurrecting her life, which is 100 years ago almost now, and bringing her back to life. Martha is named after her grandmother, which was Helen Corson's mother, Martha Maulsby, who became Martha Maulsby Corson when she married George Corson, involved in the Underground Railroad. So then Helen has a daughter. She names her daughter Martha Maulsby from her mother's maiden name, and then Hovenden, which is her married name at that point. In the Woodmere, there's a painting which we actually donated to him, but Helen made it. She painted Martha when she was a child, sitting on this couch with a dog. It can be a blessing or a curse to be the child of a famous family. The Hovendens were famous. They have two kids, one of which was Martha and a son who died earlier. It's hard sometimes, harder sometimes to have your life evolve when you have that starting, and sometimes it's easier. Anybody in those days that made sculpture was good at drawing, because that's how you start sculpture. If you can't draw, you're not going to make any sculpture. She elected to become a sculptor. Unusual, somewhat still in those days, for a woman to be a sculptor. Around 1900, you see women getting into it, but it was considered a man's occupation. Art, even, mostly was males. This is that couch we saw over in the Hovenden house, in the foyer of the main house. It's the same couch. That's probably one of her relatives. That's not Helen, but it's possibly done when she was at the academy, or I don't really know. But this is her work, and all these small pieces are different things she did. So this is what she started out doing. If you know anything about sculpture, generally you make these in clay. You can carve in plaster, but it's not normally how you do it. So you would say, make this in clay, then make a casting of it, and then ideally, if you have a commission, you make it in bronze. Of course, if you're a student, you're not making anything in bronze because it's so expensive. And then if you had to, you would recreate it in casting clay, which is stronger, which is probably what this is. But some of these may be student works. This was her sculpture studio. This was a wooden floor. In the 1800s, in the time of the Underground Railroad, and when the grandparents, the Corsons, were conducting that, this was a wagon shed. And then he added the second floor to make it Abolition Hall, and the meetings were on the second floor, and the first floor remained a wagon shed. And there was a fire in 1901 in the barn. A lot of it burned out, and the frame all stayed, but the woodwork all burned. And when they redid it, that's when they put these glass walls in, and they put a wooden floor in. Martha worked right here. She would generally have the tablets leaned up against this wall, and she would be carving in here. And she had pieces over there. I'll show a couple pictures. I mean, you can see this all set up. Certainly, but she adopted a sort of a moniker, which was MMH. A lot of artists in those days made symbols for their signatures, and MMH would look like H, and then the two sides of the H were the sides of the M, and then an M down here. So you had an H with two like chevrons in it, which were the two M's, and that's what if you ever see that, was her signature. We have this wood pattern that this was modeled from. As a wood plate looks just like this. Of course, you make a negative of it, and then you make a positive from the negative, and that's how you end up with something like this. But she made a whole series of these, and on the second floor, had them over top of the fireplace. Mostly what Martha was known for was what we call bas relief. She was what you would call a minimal bas relief, very low depth. But the advantage of bas relief, or bas relief, how it's pronounced, is you can get a lot of detail that with like a standing person, these things break off and you can't do as much. So there's a lot of detail you can get with bas relief, and it's a little easier to cast and whatnot. And that's what she did for most of her real art career. Actually, one of the stones that she did was for, everybody's heard of Violet Oakley. Her friend was Edith Emerson. They were like life partners. They were good friends at Martha. She did the funeral stone for Edith Emerson's mother. A lot of these women artists, I mean, these were women artists. They were strong-willed women artists. They were working in a field that was mostly men. The women hung out together. The Plastic Club, which is in Philly, that was still there, downtown Philadelphia. It was really founded by women, so women could see their art, because men weren't letting them into the shows. This piece has a woman, and she's holding a little image of a child or a spirit or whatever. You could almost imagine her thinking, and maybe this would be my child if I had a child. Or maybe it has, more of just a spiritual feeling, but she's sitting in a chair. This one, again, it's a woman with a child. And this sort of echo of a child back here is sort of interesting. Almost like the child that never was, or maybe a child that was stillborn, or who knows. And she's very pensive. You have the coin in there. The Livingston Corson, this is one she made of him when he graduated. That's him sitting over in the gallery on a stand, not the stand I was showing you down in the basement, but a different stand. And you can see here modeling. And she certainly wasn't modeling in plaster here, so this is something she's doing in clay, and then it was going to get transferred to plaster. Again, this is right over in that room over there. This is a plate she did for this lady. She married this guy, and a year later she died. She was doing this as a commemoration of the wedding, but actually it ended up being more of a funeral piece, which is kind of sad, but probably why she still has the plate. This is her most famous work. This is Washington Memorial Chapel in Valley Forge. I don't know if anybody's ever been there. Here's her actually carving in stone. This is the first floor of Abolition Hall where we were, and she's here carving it with her mallet and chisel. The interesting thing about this commission to do it. One was installed in 1926, one in 1936. The original idea was she was gonna make them in clay, and then it was gonna be cast in bronze. Well, then when she was done with the clay, that would have been the end of her part of it, and then somebody would have cast it. They said, no, it's got to be stone. If you ever go to the chapel, you'll see why. The whole chapel is almost all stone inside. So she priced it out. It was $2,600 for somebody to carve one of the stones. These are two separate pieces. She said, I can't afford it. I'm going to do it myself. So she did it herself, and she knew how to carve, but these are massive pieces to do. And of course, now she's doing it by transferring her image, which was already in clay, and redoing it in stone, which took a long time. The dedication of these were called the illumination. You went through the illumination. I have no idea what illumination meant, but let's hope it meant a lot of light or something so people could actually see them, because you can't see them now. But that's what they called the dedication, the illumination of the tablets. They called these tablets. This is a beautiful site, by the way. If you ever go in there, they have some beautiful stained glass. It's a beautiful place. So she was doing things on fabric, she was doing things on paper, doing things on plates, and doing things on floor tiles. These are some tiles she made later. This was a summer house. These four side pieces, and these are basically 100 years old, so they're pretty weather beaten. These are her tiles too. Lots of times, if you wet concrete, you see it a lot better. Think of this as 100 years ago. All these shapes that she did, some of them are actually embossed. You can see that. Yeah, this is one of the nicer ones, really. We used to see the detail, the raised detail here. But at one time, she tried to patent this type of work, and she was unsuccessful in getting the patent, but she developed a whole system for how to make these tiles and how to color them and whatnot. These other parts here are more the craft things she got into a little bit later in her life. She made Christmas cards like this. These are Merry Christmas type things. She did a bunch of book plates. One of the book plates for William Jean's Memorial Library up the street here. She designed that. These are some of her book plates. Martha, she died in 1941 and never married, never had kids. Livingston Corson, anybody that knows who Nancy Corson was, that was her father. They came here when Martha died. She was the last Hovenden. There's other Hovendens around the country, but she was the last Hovenden living here. Her cousin, I guess it was the son of her father's brother, I believe, on her mother's side. He was a Corson. He inherited the property, and he came here and made this into a house.